Hi there, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning in for this patriotic organ recital. Obviously, we're still in a situation where we can't see many performances live, but still, it's great that you're tuning in and that I can share with you some music written by American composers. A lot of patriotic organ music has been written over time, and a bunch of the pieces have not been written recently. A lot of what I'm going to play today was written in the 19th century and even in the 18th century. And I'm going to start with an 18th century piece. This is a voluntary by a Northeastern-based composer named William Selby. Back in the 18th century, organs had either no or very limited pedal divisions, so what you saw was me mostly using my hands and very little feet. Now I'm going to move on to a much more modern composer, Robin Dinda. Robin Dinda wrote a fanfare and meditation on My Country 'Tis of Thee. Excuse me, I stand corrected on the name of the composer. It's Murray C. Bradshaw. On a weekend like this, thunderstorms are pretty typical of the weather. And in the 19th century, a lot of composers, not just in Europe but even in America, like to write programmatic music. A lot of programmatic music that we know was written for orchestra, but in this case, I'm going to play something that was written for the organ. And this particular piece is called The Thunderstorm. How appropriate. There's some very specific notes that the composer wrote about his piece. And this composer, by the way, was also based in the northeastern United States, Massachusetts. His name was Thomas Philando Ryder. And the notes are as follows. The piece is in 3 movements. The first movement depicts the calm before the storm in an idyllic pastoral style. The second movement opens with the sounds of a small-town parade. A bagpipe band can be heard playing a typical Scottish melody. The bagpipes give way to sounds of the thunder and the fury of the storm, and I'm going to be doing some fun things with the stop knobs to make the organ sound like thunder. The thunderstorm does not dampen the spirit of the parade as a march can still be heard. Full chords and rumbling pedal create this exciting effect. The dissipation of the storm is again very specifically notated. The third movement, immediately following the storm, is in the form of a vesper hymn depicting the calm after the storm. Fun fact about the book from which this piece came: American Organ Solos, 19th Century Collection for Church and Recital Use. Well, you can tell that that was definitely not a church piece, but it works perfectly fine for a recital. And the person who edited it was Janine Jordan. Janine gave a concert at the Church of the Advent back in November of 2008. So by now that's been a good while ago. And when Janine came, she and her husband David, who is a multimedia specialist, put on a program called From Sea to Shining Sea. And there was a screen way up at the front of the church on which you could see images of organs in America back in their early days. In other words, 18th, 19th, and even the early 20th century. And I stand corrected on one thing. Those program notes that I read to you were Janine's. So I'm very grateful to her for putting on this concert and for the opportunity to buy this very neat collection of music. The spiritual is a major part of the history of the United States. African Americans sang these pieces, and if I'm not mistaken, they were often written as code songs as they were making their way towards freedom from slavery. Well, with the history of these pieces, they're very powerful and very emotional, and they've stood the test of time. There's quite a large collection of organ music written by African American composers. And Calvin Taylor has written a collection of 5 spirituals for organ, and he also wrote a spiritual suite. Not surprisingly, African American composers haven't just written organ music based on spirituals. They've written music based on German Lutheran chorales. They've written freely composed music. They've written music based on other American hymn tunes. I mean, they've really captured the gamut, but I particularly like Mr. Taylor's spiritual settings. And so now I'm going to play for you a setting of This Little Light of Mine. Recently in America, there have been some very unfortunate, very tragic, and very senseless events related to race. George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, a few of the people that come to mind when I think of the tragic deaths that have occurred in the African American community. And even though this particular spiritual setting was not written recently, it seems really appropriate to play it considering the times in which we live right now. I think that we'll all agree that we live in a huge period of uncertainty and even unrest, but certainly we're all doing the best we can to pull through. But we do go through stress a good little while, and so that's why I'm going to play for you Calvin Taylor's setting of Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen. It's quite long, and for a while it's not going to sound like Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen, but once you hear the tune, you'll know it. Now we're back to celebrating the American patriotic spirit. And I'm going to play the first three-movement suite by Charles Callahan, one of my favorite composers of music for the organ. I play a lot of his stuff for Sunday morning church services, and today I'm going to play the first two movements of a patriotic suite. One movement is based on the quote-unquote Navy hymn, known in our hymnal either as Eternal Father Strong to Save or Almighty Father Strong to Save, which accounts for all the branches of the U.S. Armed Services. And then I'm going to play a little meditation on America the Beautiful. You've probably noticed a pattern by now. Within this recital, I've been going back and forth between centuries. I don't believe I've played anything written in the 21st century, but I could always improvise, and that would give you an idea of something that would be a 21st century American composition. But right now, I'm going back to the 19th century. Eugene Thayer, again, another Northeast US-based composer who studied in Europe for a while. And so if you take a look at some of the original manuscripts of his music, a lot of the musical terms were written in German just because he did study in Germany. And in the 19th century, it was certainly popular for budding US musicians, if they wanted a career in music, to study in Europe, take a big ship across the Atlantic, stay there for a while, and come back and master their craft in the United States and teach people with everything they learned in Europe. But certainly, ever since the 19th century, we've had many, many wonderful musicians, and Eugene Thayer is certainly one of them. I'm going to play the first two movements of his second sonata for organ. The first movement is based on America, so I'm going to play a second setting of this recital of My Country 'Tis of Thee, and then the second movement is not based on any particular patriotic American piece or song, but it's a lovely farewell instead. I believe the German word for it is Lebewohl. I'm going to play one more piece on this recital. On a bit of a personal note, this is a very significant Independence Day weekend for me because this is my first weekend celebrating the United States as an American citizen. A lot of you may know that I grew up in Canada and that I became a United citizen by November 22nd of last year, 2019, which coincidentally enough is St. Cecilia's Day, the day of the patron saint of music. So I think that that was divine intervention that should happen the way it did. But it's been a pleasure and an honor to live in this country. No country in the world is perfect, but certainly the United States has been very, very good to me by giving me the opportunity to pursue full-time work as a church musician, and also opportunities to do some musical work away from the Church of the Advent, whether it be as a keyboardist with the Spartanburg Philharmonic or as a keyboardist with different ensembles at Converse College whenever I'm called upon there. I also get the opportunity to teach, so thank you not only the United States, but thank you people of Spartanburg for giving me these opportunities. Also like to thank Zach Blankenship, who you don't see right now, but he's the behind-the-scenes person right now. He's the one who's recording this recital, and he and a team of others have been responsible for the live streaming that we've all been able to enjoy over these many months. We will get back to live worship someday. Hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. We'll just keep the faith and hope for the best. Meanwhile, I'm going to play some variations on the most popular, or at least I think the most popular American patriotic song, and that would be the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Dudley Buck, another 19th century composer based in Hartford, Connecticut, wrote this set of variations which gets pretty wild at points. Sometimes my feet get wild, sometimes my hand get wild, sometimes it gets rather tragic sounding, and then the piece ends with a rousing conclusion. In fact, over the past 2 minutes of this piece. If you'd like, you can sing along, because the way that the music's written, it sounds like the organ's playing slowly enough for you to be able to sing the Star-Spangled Banner. So if you'd like to sing our national anthem from a social distance, by all means, feel free to do so. Thank you so much for tuning in, and happy Independence Day, 4th of July weekend. God bless America. Well, believe it or not, I'm actually going to play one more piece. And I guess to a certain extent I'm doing this for selfish reasons, but today, July 1st, is Canada Day. And so as an encore, what better way to close a patriotic recital than by playing something Canadian? Well, maybe that's not the best thing to do, but it is Canada Day. And so I'm going to go ahead, cut down the organ's volume just a little bit, and play and sing for you Canada's national anthem, O Canada. I haven't lived in Canada in a long time, and I understand that the words have changed slightly in one section, so I hope I get it right. But here goes, Canada's national anthem, O Canada. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true North, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Happy birthday, Canada. Bonne fête, Canada. And of course, God bless the USA.